Hello and welcome to our Retire Early lifestyle. How is everyone today? Hope everyone's having a great day. We've made 5 videos about prices popping over the course of 10 years, showing you the countries that will pop next. Our research of patterns, history, traffic, videos, and trends don't lie. Together, they're going to provide the details. And the 5 countries and some of their cities that are price bubbling right now are what we're going to show you today. So let's hurry right on over to the information that you're waiting for. These 5 countries will price spiral out of control and pop in 2025. And here they are. And by the way, they may already be price spiraling out of control. Colombia. In our last video about bubbles popping, we shared that Medellin, Colombia will be the next to pop, and it will happen in 2025. We're only talking about a city here price popping, not the whole country. Medellin has seen better days. Many ugly things are happening in this city, as is typical at the maturing of the cycle. From overpricing to crime spikes towards the expat or digital nomad. Many scams going on that even the seasoned travelers will fall for, especially if it involves pretty Colombian women. We say, be very cautious who you allow to be your friend. Why do we think Medellin, Colombia will price pop? Well, the locals are getting agitated, and when the locals begin to feel a crunch when it comes to renting in their own country, that's right before a price pop. Also, it's all over the internet that gentrification is taking over in the cities of Bogota and Medellin. We know exactly how it works in Latin America. In Cuenca, Ecuador, after the place exploded with Americans, some of the advertisements in the local Spanish newspaper, but written in the English language, yes, in a Spanish newspaper, in English, it would say something like this: apartment for rent, foreigners only. House for rent, Americanos only. Now that's a clue that the rental markets were getting taken over by the expat community. Many of the adverts were like this. Have you ever looked at a Spanish newspaper? You can learn a lot by doing that. We would see in the wanted section of the Spanish newspaper in Cuenca, Ecuador, wanted 2 or 3 bedroom house will pay up to $250. And this is a sign that the Ecuadorians were having a difficult time finding a home in the local price range, because the homes that were normally $150 to $300 a month were now priced at $600 and $800. Sometimes the Ecuadorian homeowners would remodel their kitchens to American-style standards and then put double the price on the rental. One time we called on an ad in the Spanish newspaper on a house that was $300. And when we pulled up to the driveway, there was an Ecuadorian family getting out of their car to go look at the same house we were going to go look at. We saw what was happening and we stopped in our tracks, got back in our car, and drove off. No way were we going to take a house right out from under the locals like that. We're sure it is the same way in Medellin and Bogota, Colombia, and there are things that we can do about it. Many people say it's unfair to blame the digital nomads on the rising rents and displacing the locals, and you'd be right. The greedy landlords are just as much to blame. We can learn to negotiate price, and if you're living somewhere as a permanent resident, you can get a way better long-term rental lease. Be ready to say no gracias when you know the prices just to be out of line. Just walk away. That's what you have to do. It's what we did. We can also look at other destinations, and if we really like Colombia, maybe the city of Armenia would be a better choice at the moment, since this city still seems quite peaceful, and many have said it is the least crime-ridden expat city in Colombia. So, moving on to our number 4 on this list, Thailand. Thailand used to be a backpacker's paradise in 2019, just 5 years ago. Thailand's rents were cheaper than many Latin American countries like Ecuador and Mexico. People were remarking on our Ecuador videos in the comments section how they were renting a 3-bedroom luxury condo for $225. But something has drastically changed with Thailand. Now we're seeing the same condo around $650, and that's in 5 years. As per the norm, we see foreigners only going to just a handful of areas in Thailand, such as Phuket, Bangkok, and a few others. It usually takes about 5 years of steady traffic to these most promoted cities before the prices get so out of hand, and then they pop. Here's the thing, if people are still willing to pay a higher and higher price for everything, the bubble will just continue to grow bigger and bigger, and that's what is happening in the foreigner spots in Thailand right now. When you see foreigners ready to go home because of the prices, it's ready to blow, and 2025 is the year for Thailand. We've noticed from expats themselves they either love Thailand or hate it. One person has said it's just too expensive and they're thinking about leaving. So we looked at the prices, and a luxury 1-bedroom condo is renting for $650 to $1,700 a month now. The question is, how much higher foreigners are willing to pay? That's the thing. Perhaps you can still find a nice 2-bedroom apartment outside of the promoted hotspots, but would you want to live there? Thailand has recently changed some things around, such as making it legal for foreigners to own property, which did not used to be the case. For foreigners, Thai property rights are still very strict though, and they do have certain laws and procedures that you must follow. We recommend to do your due diligence if you're considering buying property in Thailand. This is actually a good thing, as the Thais are simply protecting their own people from a foreigner saturation of the property markets like what we saw in Lisbon, Portugal, and now in many major cities in Spain. The Golden Visa, which Portugal banned in 2023, allowed foreigners to just come in and automatically become permanent residents while investing in property without tax consequences for 10 years. These schemes bring in the wealthy investors, and for a while it works. But the markets get too saturated and overpriced, and the prices pop. So moving on to Mexico. Mexico is being gentrified in a dozen cities throughout the country. In certain Mexican cities like Puerto Vallarta, Oaxaca, Mexico City, and Cancun, prices are spiking out of control. But not only that, the locals are becoming bitter and confrontational. We saw this happen in Lake Chapala back in 2015, around the same time Ecuador was also dealing with price spikes. First, it starts out with just a little whining and complaining to the city council, but when enough of the locals start complaining, it gets ugly. Mexico's size keeps the country from totally spilling over and frothing, and some people like to say, well, you can just move out into the rural areas and find a much cheaper rent if you can't afford the city. No kidding. Of course you can move out into the middle of nowhere, but most expats don't want to live out in the country or rural areas, and doing so can be risky, and we do not recommend it. In Puerto Vallarta, they've been talking about gentrification now for several years, and it's only getting worse. Gentrification is the precursor to price bubbles and eventually the pop. The city of Puerto Vallarta is also complaining about the damage to the authentic Mexican culture because of too many foreigners. They say the city of Oaxaca has been the hardest hit in Mexico, but all the cities where foreigners bombard a country is going to see price spikes. It's inevitable. It does remain to be seen which city will pop first in Mexico, but we're keeping a close eye on it. Number 2, Portugal. In 2022, Portugal received the highest amount of American new residents than any other country. Portugal attracts retirees, early retired, and investors, and the digital nomad, so they were seeing a lot of traffic. Portugal saw more Americans move there in 2022 than any other country. Portugal price popped once already, and foreigner traffic slacked off in late 2023 when Portugal did away with their golden visa program. Portugal had to do away with their golden visa program before all the property was taken over by foreign investment. Even though many foreigners fled the country in 2023, the little darling is picking back up somewhat and is starting to gain traction again. Foreigner traffic works in trends, remember. This time, Lisbon's government limits the amount of Airbnbs in the city so as not to displace the locals like what happened in 2022 and 2023. It's safe to say that Portugal and its handful of cities that foreigners like to move to will price pop sometime in 2025. Again, Portugal is not a very big country, and it just doesn't take very long. In Portugal, the housing problem has been magnified by tourism, whose robust growth before the pandemic has come roaring back, as well as an influx of foreign investors who found relatively low real estate prices in Lisbon and have been driving up the prices that force the local people out of their homes. And the locals have been protesting ever since. Something will give soon. And so that brings us to number 1, Spain. We're going to touch down on several cities in Spain because these cities are seeing more and more explosion of foreigners. Barcelona, Madrid, Seville, and Malaga. These cities are not just bursting with higher rent prices and greedy landlords, but also over-tourism and a slew of digital nomads. The world's third most popular digital nomad destination, according to the Spanish online newspaper Publico. Spain is the third most popular destination in the world for digital nomads behind Portugal and Thailand. The Spanish government granted almost 7,500 digital nomad visas in the first 10 months following its introduction alone. Recent data from Spain's National Statistics Institute shows that 8 out of 10 new residents moving to Malaga are currently foreigners. So we're going to start with Malaga, located on the Costa del Sol of Spain. It's a lovely coastal city with great weather, and it wasn't too long ago prices weren't that bad either. But just over the last few years, Malaga has seen throngs of tourists and digital nomads. Again, the locals have had enough, and the Spaniards are much more vocal about their feelings. They're sick and tired of their cities getting overrun and overpriced by tourism and expatism. Heads up, bring your antibacterial wipes in your backpack because, well, you may need them. The locals are going to the apartment buildings and smearing dog poop all over the lockboxes. So when the foreigner shows up, there's a big, messy, smelly surprise waiting for you. In some places, however, things have taken a slightly more unsettling turn. In the southern city of Seville, Airbnb lockboxes were recently allegedly covered in dog poop. And in Barcelona, tourists were sprayed with water pistols and told to leave the city. For digital nomads and remote workers wanting to make Spain home, this presents some food for thought. When it comes down to displacing the locals from their cities, the Spaniards are getting quite upset. Can you blame them? Who is moving to Spain? Doing thorough research on both Malaga, Barcelona, Madrid, and Seville, and a few others, we find that they are not only popular spots for the digital nomad, but with the retiree and the early retiree as well. Why are Malaga locals so irate with the tourists? Well, the city on the Costa del Sol has long been a popular destination for visitors thanks to its sunny climate and relatively low cost of living. However, it's recently become an even more desirable destination for holidaymakers and digital nomads alike. Keep in mind that most digital nomads are not tourists based on a vacation stay of a week or two. Although many digital nomads are getting longer stay visas nowadays, many digital nomads move to these countries for 3 months at a time, which is considered a lifestyle. And we're seeing remote workers living in Spain on the 90-day free visa stay. In the Schengen EU countries, Americans are allowed 90 days without the need to get a visa. After the 90 days are up, they move on to a non-Schengen country for another 90 days, and then they can go back to Spain for another 90 days or another EU country. This is called the 90, 180 day rule. 90 days is the maximum stay that you can stay in any 180 days. Cumulative across all Schengen countries, and you must leave the Schengen area once you've used your 90 days and can only return once you've stayed outside for an entire 90-day period. Since Spain only allows 90-day visa-free stays, the digital nomad usually rents an Airbnb or an overpriced tourist rental because they can't rent at the long-term yearly rate. So they're basically paying tourist prices, and there's no negotiating or anything like that. And this is the main reason why Malaga, Spain, and many other popular digital nomad cities around the world have blown up in price. Malaga locals, though, think enough is enough, believing they are being priced out and alienated from their own home city. That means that there's probably a lot of digital nomads there. Locals are saying they can't find an apartment in their own city because they're mostly geared for tourism and digital nomads. Speaking to a local newspaper, Drunko explained that he began the campaign after he was apparently kicked out of the home he'd lived in for a decade. He claimed that the landlord refused to negotiate the rent or even sell him the property. The reason? They want to turn it into a short-term rental for the tourists. Let's move on to Barcelona. The locals don't know the difference between the tourists or the digital nomad. And when they say tourists go home, they mean everyone pretty much that speaks English. They want you to know they spit in your beer, and they probably really do. That's gross. You should get your beer on tap and watch them pour it into the glass, then keep an eye on it at all times. We talked about Barcelona and Madrid, Spain, bursting out of her seams about a year ago, and it looks like that is about to happen very soon, most likely in 2025. Actually, any of these cities we're talking about in Spain could pop in 2025. With wage earnings so diverse between the Spaniards and the digital nomad, is it any wonder they're having rental spike issues and displacement of the locals? We can't always blame the digital nomad or the expat on the phenomenon of gentrification either. It is as much the greedy Spaniard landlord and Airbnb hosts that continue to raise their rates with the explosion of foreigner traffic. Did I say greedy landlords and Airbnb owners? I hope so. One digital nomad said that he felt intimidated to speak English in Spain. I can just imagine with the resentment now from the Barcelonans that any speaking of English and carrying a laptop might be an ingredient for some angry backlash. Or, instead of confronting the Americans straight on, they'll just spit in your drink. And now it looks like some coffee shops are banning the digital nomad from their shops because they hog the tables with their laptops while they work. Well, that's one of the nice lifestyle amenities for the remote worker. He or she gets to sit in a quaint Spanish coffee shop enjoying a great cup of coffee and a glorious sandwich for half the price they'd pay for it in the USA, all the while getting paid in wonderful USD dollars. Anti-tourist activism has steadily built momentum in Spain this year. It's ranged from large-scale protests in major cities like Madrid and Malaga to more subtle actions like anti-tourist graffiti peppering Spain's inner cities and coffee shops, banning digital nomads from hogging tables with their laptops. So as we keep saying on this channel, we do have to take everything into account, such as this. Does Spain still offer a golden visa? Well, Spain launched its residence by investment scheme in 2013. It allowed wealthy people from outside the EU to obtain residency permits on investing more than 500,000 euros in real estate or certain types of business. However, in April, the country's government said it plans to scrap the real estate route, which accounts for 94% of their applications, to reduce pressure on the housing market. Our food for thought: instead of going to these obvious cities where everyone goes, we need to find a lesser known hideaway and just go there. They will probably welcome the digital nomad because less tourists go there, at least for now. So find your hideaway and keep it to yourself. That's how you have to do it nowadays with the advent of the internet and the millions and millions of eyeballs that watch videos about moving, living, retiring, and vacationing abroad. Try Oliete, Spain, a beautiful little village that is welcoming digital nomads right now. You can speak English and no one cares. Oliete, Spain. They're saying it's an olive oil village, and they want their community revived using digital nomads. So there you have it, the cities right now that are gearing up for prices to pop in 2025. These 5 are not the only cities that are experiencing high prices either. Costa Rica, Italy, and some of the Southeastern Asian countries are starting to go into the price bubbles as well. Which city that we mentioned today do you think will pop the price bubble first? Let us know in the comments. Take care, everyone. Be safe. Bye-bye.